Welcome to Secrets of the Ancients, where the mysteries of ancient history come to life. From forgotten Egyptian dynasties to wonders carved in stone, we dive deep into the hidden past, discover the secrets, subscribe, and journey into a world where time speaks. X-rays reveal something weird in King Tut's mask, and experts stay silent. What a discovery.
Scientists recently found some ancient artifacts near King Tut's tomb. Turns out his final resting place isn't as isolated as we once thought. It's kind of like an ancient public cemetery with around a dozen wooden coffins buried nearby over 3,600 years ago. Okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. The other tombs weren't right next to his, but they were close to Luxor. These new finds could help us better understand what life was like in ancient Egypt. And guess what? Ancient Egyptians weren't that different from us today. For example, it seems like women have always loved jewelry. Archaeologists uncovered a beautifully made necklace with 30 amethyst beads, 2 agate stones, and a charm shaped like a hippo's head. Probably quite trendy back then. They also found 2 copper mirrors. One had a handle shaped like a lotus flower, and the other was decorated with the goddess Hathor, who was associated with the sky, women, fertility, and love. And it doesn't stop there.
These excavations near King Tut's burial site led to another major discovery. For the first time in thousands of years, parts of Queen Hatshepsut's mortuary temple were uncovered. She was believed to be the second female pharaoh, known for ruling with wisdom and strength, leaving behind a legacy as solid as stone. Her long-lost temple opens a window into a time filled with power, intrigue, and deep spiritual devotion. Archaeologists also found over 1,000 beautifully decorated stone blocks on the edges of this hidden temple. Not many women in ancient Egypt made it to the throne, but nearby they also found another tomb. This one belonged to the overseer of Queen Tetischer's palace, a man named Jehuti Mes. Apparently, Queen Hatshepsut had more tombs built in the area known as Upper Khamis. Unlike the famous pyramids, these were carved directly into the rock, showing a different approach to protecting the soul in the afterlife. Among the amazing artifacts found, clay toys, mummy masks, winged scarabs, and a bunch of protective charms. Unfortunately, a lot of the valuables were probably looted long ago by grave robbers who stumbled upon the site before archaeologists ever had a chance. Still, they left behind some incredible stuff, like pottery used for offering bread and meat, and even archers' bows, suggesting a military link.
But let's talk about something creepier. Protecting the soul might be more serious than we think, especially if you're wandering around Luxor in search of ancient secrets. You're not afraid of King Tut's curse, are you? Let me tell you what happened to those who weren't. For years, Egyptologists, especially those who believed in the supernatural, were convinced that a mysterious curse surrounded the discovery of King Tut's tomb. That belief came from the strange and sudden deaths of several of the archaeologists who opened it in 1922. With no logical explanation for why they died, people found it easier to blame a curse than dig for the truth. But turns out it wasn't a curse at all. The real culprit? Radiation. You might be wondering, radiation? In an ancient Egyptian tomb? After all, radiation wasn't discovered until the 19th century, and the ancient Egyptians didn't exactly have radioactive materials lying around to make King Tut's tomb glow. So where did it come from? The theory is that toxic waste, possibly uranium or other hazardous substances, had been sealed inside the tomb for over 3,000 years. Some say the radiation levels inside the burial chamber are so high that anyone entering could be exposed to a deadly dose, leading to radiation sickness or worse. Crazy thing is, your fridge might be just as dangerous if you've got a month-old moldy dinner sitting in the back. But let's stick to archaeology. This isn't just about King Tut's tomb either. Digging up ancient Egyptian sites can actually be pretty risky. High levels of radiation have been found in several Old Kingdom tombs across Egypt. At least 2 sites near the Giza pyramids set off Geiger counters, and radon gas, a radioactive gas, has been detected in many underground tombs in Saqqara. What's fascinating is that the builders of these ancient tombs might have known how dangerous they were. Some of the walls are covered in spooky warnings. One inscription reads, Whoever disturbs this tomb will die of a disease no doctor can cure. Another simply says, forbidden. A den of evil spirits? Supernatural curses still haunt ancient sites. The idea that these ancient tombs are cursed has only grown stronger over time, partly thanks to creepy signs and warnings carved into the walls, and partly due to strange, unexplained deaths. Archaeologists have been baffled by this stuff for ages. But things really escalated about 100 years ago with the mysterious death of Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the excavation of King Tut's tomb in 1922. He supposedly entered the burial chamber with several others, and never lived to tell the tale. Another key figure was Arthur Weigall, a British Egyptologist who was there when the tomb was opened. He's often credited with starting the whole curse legend. He died fairly young in 1934, in his early 50s, possibly from a radiation-related illness. In total, 6 out of the 26 people who were present at the tomb's opening died within 10 years, from a variety of causes. It wasn't all X-ray exposure. The list includes suffocation, strokes, heart failure, pneumonia, and even poisoning. Pretty grim, huh? But not everyone who entered the tomb met a tragic fate. One man, Howard Carter, the archaeologist who actually discovered the tomb, seemed to avoid the curse completely. Some saw his survival as proof the curse wasn't real. After the excavation, Carter published several books and eventually left archaeology to deal antiques to museums. Although he lived a full life and wasn't killed or cursed outright, rumors still swirled. One popular story linked him romantically to Lord Carnarvon's daughter Evelyn. Some claimed he was madly in love with her but stayed single after she married someone else. Others said they had a secret affair while she was in Egypt, which ended with her father's death and her sudden departure. But none of that seems to be true. Evelyn was only 6 when she met Carter. They stayed friends until the end of his life, and she was one of the few people at his funeral. She denied any romantic involvement, saying they weren't especially close. A year after the tomb's discovery, Evelyn married politician Sir Brograve Beauchamp and had a daughter with him. That same year, Beauchamp and his parents even toured the tomb, guided by Carter himself. Carter never married, and aside from those rumors about Evelyn, he had no known romantic relationships. Honestly, he never seemed like much of a people person. He passed away in 1939 after a long illness at the age of 64, right around the average life expectancy in the UK at the time. So no one really saw his death as part of the curse. Still, it's worth noting that when he died, several artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb were found in his London apartment. These were eventually returned to Egypt, and some say that moment marked the official end of the so-called curse. Who knows? Maybe if he hadn't kept all those ancient souvenirs, he would have lived longer. Of course, a lot of the cursed deaths might not be so mysterious after all. Strange events during the excavation probably helped fuel the legend. For instance, Carnarvon died after a mosquito bite got infected. Around the same time, Cairo experienced a bizarre power outage during a sandstorm. Meanwhile, back in England, Carnarvon's dog Susie escaped from his home, barked hysterically at nothing, and, according to staff, suddenly dropped dead the exact moment her owner died. So maybe radiation wasn't the whole story. Maybe it really was those ancient relics that sealed their fates. Spooky, right?
Unlike many other ancient Egyptian tombs, King Tut's remained untouched by looters for over 3,000 years. One reason? It was smaller than usual and hidden in a spot called the Valley of the Kings. By the time Carter came along, the area had been pretty thoroughly explored, and Tut's tomb was buried under rubble from the construction of a nearby tomb, which probably helped keep it hidden. There weren't even any inscriptions or markings outside to give it away. Time itself helped preserve the tomb's contents in amazing condition, right up until the 1920s, when Carter finally broke in. But was he a heroic adventurer? Or was there more to the story? Recent findings suggest Carter may have been craftier than people used to think. He was long considered a genuine archaeologist, not just a glorified treasure hunter. From a young age, he was fascinated with ancient Egypt. He started out sketching carvings and inscriptions from old tombs. Once he discovered King Tut's remains, he spent the next decade cataloguing and preserving everything. Golden thrones, chariots, statues, and even Tutankhamun's boat. The official story was that all the artifacts from King Tut's tomb were sent down the Nile to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Well, that's what they said. But newer findings suggest not everything made it into the hands of Egyptian authorities. Apparently there's a secret letter that reveals Howard Carter had a little policy of his own, 10 for them, 1 for me. The letter was sent in 1922 to Sir Alan Gardner, a linguist and close friend of Carter. In it, Carter talked about discovering the tomb and asked his friend for some advice. In another letter from 1934, Gardner actually thanked Carter for a protective amulet Carter had gifted him, a gift of appreciation. Carter insisted it wasn't from Tutankhamun's tomb, but it clearly was. Even the British director of the Egyptian Museum suspected Carter was sneaking items out but couldn't prove it. He compared Gardner's amulet to one found in the tomb, and they matched exactly. Gardner was so frustrated at being dragged into the mess that he let Carter know in another letter. Still, he chose to be a loyal friend and didn't throw Carter under the bus. Instead, he just advised him to return the looted item to Cairo. Anyway, Carter's sketchy behavior didn't end there. In 1947, a man named Alfred Lucas, who worked with another controversial archaeologist, claimed in a little-known Cairo journal that Carter had secretly opened the burial chamber before the official unveiling. According to the theory, Carter and his crew might have snuck in early to grab a few valuable items before anyone else could see them. Obviously, they couldn't risk selling any of those things while they were alive. But later, after their deaths, some items started popping up at auctions. Carter never admitted to anything, but he never denied it either. The Egyptian government wasn't taking any chances. They banned him from re-entering the tomb for a while. Some say the supposed thefts were tied to the infamous curse of King Tut. If you haven't heard of it, the legend claims that anyone who disturbed the boy king's final resting place would be cursed with terrible luck. It wasn't quite like a mummy rising from the grave, but people whispered that several involved with the excavation met sudden and mysterious deaths. The most famous victim of the curse was George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, the British aristocrat who funded the tomb's discovery. He died just a year after the tomb was opened. People love to call it mysterious, but the truth is Herbert was already in pretty bad shape when he got to Cairo. He ended up dying from what was likely just a regular illness. Let's talk numbers. Tons of people were connected to the tomb's discovery: guards, archaeologists, support staff, and yes, some died not long after the tomb was opened to visitors. But let's be real, with a group that big statistically, a few deaths were bound to happen by coincidence. In fact, many of those cursed individuals lived more than 20 years after the supposed curse started. Even Herbert's daughter lived well into the 1980s, more than 50 years later. Howard Carter himself lived until 1939, a full 16 years after his big find. Some believe the whole curse was actually just a clever PR move. When the tomb was discovered, Carter wanted to keep nosy reporters away. So maybe he came up with the idea of a spooky curse to scare them off. But what was actually stolen from King Tut's tomb? Mainly jewelry, and Carter may have taken some of it himself. A French expert did some deep research using old 1920s photographs from inside the tomb and compared them with items in museums and auction houses. He started connecting the dots on where some of the missing jewelry ended up. Take, for example, a necklace that once lay across Tut's chest. It was shattered into pieces. Some parts ended up, through Carter, in the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Missouri. Other fragments showed up in a necklace owned by anonymous collectors who tried to sell it in 2015, unsuccessfully. Even the Nelson Atkins Museum confirmed the connection on their website. Then there's a fragment of a headdress and some beads that turned up elsewhere. Apparently Carter stole another piece that seemed to belong to Tut. It ended up as a pendant and is now on display at the St. Louis Art Museum. Another luxurious collar, made of glazed ceramic charms, spent some time at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Luckily, that one was returned to Egypt a little over a decade ago. And yep, it also seems to have been taken by Carter, just as you might have guessed by now. But missing artifacts aside, King Tutankhamun still left behind a ton of amazing things that have helped us understand this incredible ancient culture. Starting with the famous golden burial mask, that massive 21-inch masterpiece made of gold, semi-precious stones and coloured glass paste. It weighs about 22 pounds and shows the boy king with a long beard and a headdress featuring a cobra and a vulture. On the back there's a protective spell from an important ancient Egyptian religious text meant to ensure the mask works just as well in the afterlife. Apparently Tut also liked board games. 4 of them were found in his tomb and some were made from ivory. Archaeologists even discovered a pair of gold sandals, though it's safe to say they were more decorative than practical. Honestly, the young pharaoh probably never even wore them in real life. Speaking of fashion, it turns out Tut had a pretty sharp sense of style. They even found a mannequin in his tomb that was likely used for trying on or organizing his clothes and jewelry. And it seems like he enjoyed music too. 2 trumpets were found in his tomb. They were even played once back in 1935 during a BBC broadcast. But today the instruments are way too fragile to touch.
Now, shifting gears, have you heard of Göbekli Tepe? It's an ancient site in Turkey that literally made historians rewrite the history books. Over 11,000 years ago, a group of prehistoric humans built this mysterious masterpiece, and it's even older than Stonehenge. Before it was discovered, archaeologists believed people back then didn't know much about iron or pottery. They were convinced that settled life only began once people started farming. But Göbekli flipped that idea on its head. It suggested that religious temples came before agriculture, that the urge to worship brought people together, not the need to grow crops. Meet Professor Schmidt, the man whose findings changed the theory. He showed that hunter-gatherer societies were the ones who laid the groundwork for this settled lifestyle. Back in the 1960s, other archaeologists had visited the area too, but they completely missed the point. When they surveyed the site, they found a hill with scattered limestone slabs and thought it was just an old medieval cemetery. They had no clue what was really buried there. In 1994, Schmidt started his own survey of prehistoric sites in the region. Surprise. He immediately realised he'd stumbled upon something truly special. Unlike the flat, barren plateaus nearby, Göbekli had a gently rounded top that rose 50 feet above the surrounding land. Funny enough, the name Göbekli Tepe translates to Potbelly Hill. Schmidt was convinced that only humans could have built something like this. And those broken limestone pieces people thought were gravestones, they turned out to be something much more exciting. It was like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. The meaning of everything shifted, and Schmidt and his team were about to uncover the secrets buried just below the surface. To their surprise, they found no signs of a settlement. No hearths, no houses, no clay statues that you'd normally find at other sites from that era. But they did find stone tools like hammers, which showed the ancient builders had been hard at work. So Schmidt and his team took a wild guess about how old the stone structures might be, and carbon dating backed up their estimates. Suddenly, the mysterious feel of the site began to make sense, like a puzzle slowly coming together. You might think that people back then didn't have the tools to build something as impressive as Göbekli Tepe, but you'd be wrong. It turns out these prehistoric folks used flint tools instead of fancy metal chisels. They were actually really skilled at carving the softer limestone and shaping it into pillars on the spot. Then, they'd carry the pillars a short distance up the hill and set them upright. Once they completed each stone circle, they covered it with layers of earth. Over time, they built more circles, and voila, you've got yourself a mysterious hill that would leave people thousands of years later totally amazed. In their first year of excavation, the team looked at 15,000 animal bones, all from wild creatures. These people didn't have pets, and they weren't farming yet. They hunted for their meals. But that was about to change because the area had everything needed to start agriculture. Scientists believed there were wild sheep and grains that could be domesticated. Guess what? Just 20 meters away, geneticists discovered evidence of the world's oldest domesticated wheat in a prehistoric village. This groundbreaking find totally changed how we view the rise of civilization. Before this, experts believed that people had to learn how to farm and settle down before they could build temples and develop complex societies. But, surprise, Schmidt's research flipped that whole idea on its head. He argued that the massive effort put into building these incredible structures actually led to the rise of advanced communities. In other words, major social and cultural changes happened before farming. Schmidt had a fascinating theory about Göbekli Tepe. He believed it might have been a special burial site where people left their loved ones. And here's the twist. The burial site was decorated with elaborate statues and symbols representing deities from the spiritual world. This idea, that Göbekli Tepe may have been a sacred place, adds another layer of complexity to the story. We may never know exactly what the site was for, but Schmidt's insights challenge us to think about how deeply ancient hunter-gatherer societies might have respected their ancestors and believed in it. afterlife. Now, let's talk about the real stars of the show, those amazing T-shaped pillars that dominate Göbekli Tepe. These mysterious structures stand anywhere from 10 to 20 feet tall and likely represent stylized human figures. But one sculpture really stands out, a three-dimensional carving of a lion. It captures the imagination because it suggests that lions once roamed Anatolia during the Neolithic period. These stone pillars are arranged in circles and placed in rectangular pits. Each circle follows a similar layout, two tall T-shaped pillars in the center, surrounded by smaller ones facing inward. Pretty elegant design, right? Some of these towering pillars reach up to 16 feet tall and weigh between 7 and 10 tons. Some of them are plain, but others are intricately carved, almost like works of art. You can see foxes, scorpions, and vultures coming to life, crawling and twisting along the stone surfaces. But it's not just animals. Some pillars also feature abstract human shapes and even tiny carvings of clothing, like belts. Now, there's one pillar that's a total standout, like a rock star among stones. This ancient piece suggests a comet may have hit the Earth, triggering a cold period that lasted about 1,000 years. Earlier studies of ice cores from Greenland hinted at this theory, but now the carvings at Göbekli Tepe seem to back it up. The carvings kind of act like a prehistoric comic strip. One even shows a headless human figure. When researchers ran the images through computer analysis, they found links to constellations, suggesting the temple might have also been used as an ancient observatory. It's as if our ancestors were recording a catastrophic event in their own unique symbolic language. Archaeologists have been digging and researching Göbekli Tepe since the mid-1990s, peeling back layers of history and giving us a deeper look at the complex connections between belief, community, and survival. They don't plan to stop anytime soon. In fact, the full excavation might take another 150 years. Who knows what else they'll uncover? Say, Göbekli Tepe has been classified as a purely ritual site, with no signs of everyday domestic life. We used to assume that no water meant it couldn't support semi-permanent communities. But scientists now think it's time to revisit those assumptions and take a fresh look at Göbekli Tepe. Maybe a group of people lived in the area, not full-time, but close enough. They might have moved around a bit, yet kept coming back to this sacred site. Göbekli Tepe isn't just one temple. It's a stunning complex of over 20 ancient structures. As archaeologists dig deeper, they're uncovering a unique design with two key pillars at the center of each building, surrounded by smaller elements